Here we are. Welcome to Comp 620. We're going to talk about infrastructure and security. Then we'll do a review. Again, companies are spending more and more, at least the big companies, on cybersecurity. Infrastructure security is what you think it is, protecting the infrastructure. There are all sorts of reasons why we might have infrastructure failure, things that might go wrong. Terrorism, somebody might deliberately try to go out there and break something, usually for political gain, to make their point. Theft, people might break into stuff. What I notice is going into power systems, these substations, and stealing the metal. Yeah, you got to be some kind of brain to try to remove the copper from a power substation while it's working. Sabotage, a bunch of people will go out there and try to break the system for whatever reason. Information warfare, yes, people are trying to change public opinion and, of course, damage infrastructure. And then there's natural disasters. Things happen. Natural disasters shouldn't be overlooked. Hurricanes, all sorts of weather things can cause problems that can cause power failures, flooding, and just watch the news. You'll see all this stuff. Some of these things are unlikely. Here in Greensboro, North Carolina, earthquakes are not very common. In other parts of the country, yes, if you live in California, in certain areas, earthquakes happen much more often than you'll find them here in Greensboro. And then there's those nasty squirrels that go up there and eat things and they'll chew through the wires. Now, most squirrels only do that once, but it can cause a problem. And in addition to the natural things that go wrong, sometimes there are people who just want to break things. They get angry and they're going to go out and make a point by breaking some infrastructure. And again, it can be local people or it can be foreign nations. It can be individuals. Sometimes people get upset and they decide they're going to make a point, or they're going to do extortion. They're going to tell the utility that if they don't pay up a bunch of money, they'll turn them off in some way. So we've talked about ransomware and other things that attack infrastructure. Yes, here in North Carolina, in Greensboro, the Colonial Pipeline had a problem with ransomware that shut the Colonial Pipeline down for a while. The pipeline pumps oil throughout the country, or at least the eastern part of the country. Of course, you have terrorist groups that are out there trying to break things. They can launch a cyber attack on many different. It doesn't take much. A good Comp 422 or Comp 620 student should be able to go out there and cause some damage. Please don't, but go out there and break things. And of course, countries that don't like other countries for some reason might launch a cyber war and really go all out to break things. We are much more connected than we have been in the past. Most of the networks and utilities are using computers. Everybody uses computers these days. That's why computer science is such a good major to be in. Cybersecurity is one of the best parts of computer science to be in. You can find lots of jobs in this field because everybody's vulnerable. They need us. Some people more than others. My example here is I can imagine some small town's water system may not be very computer connected, but they may be. And if they are, they may not be very protected. Some systems are highly connected. Power grid. Yes, the power grid, each different company connects to other companies in order to balance the load. A few years ago, several years ago, someplace in the Midwest, a tree limb fell, the power line broke that, and it cascaded. Power failures in one utility caused troubles in the connected utilities, and the whole northeast of the United States and Canada blacked out. So they were very connected, and that happened by accident. Intentionally, you can do a lot of things. And one could assume that being interconnected makes you more vulnerable. It has many benefits, but it also makes you more vulnerable. Of course, electrical power runs almost everything. Computers, and you need it to make a lot of things work. If the power doesn't run, a lot of things don't work. The government has admitted that the United States is not quite as protected as it ought to be, that it might be possible for people to attack our electrical power supply. Now, people are working very hard to protect it, but they don't believe it's as protected as it should be. And of course, things are interconnected. Sometimes just natural things cause power failure. In other words, the one I mentioned with the tree falling, that was natural. One company loses power because their wires are broken. They start pulling power from the neighboring company, and those companies then get overloaded. They start to fail, and it's just cascading failures. They've worked a lot to fix that. So here's our first clicker question for today. And how many power companies are there in the United States? So let's launch that. Everybody, oh, I should get my clicker card. Okay, anybody else out there wake up? Want to click on this one? Oh, another one clicked. Okay, think that's probably all we're going to get. 82%. We have a variety of opinion on this one. Of course, I didn't say this is just guess. What did you think? The answer turns out to be 2,940. At least that's what a Google search told me. I have to look at a couple websites. Why? Who cares about that? Well, when you have a large number of independent power companies, it becomes more difficult to attack. If we only had 24 power companies, get them all, but with something close to 3,000, it makes it a little bit more difficult. And as you mentioned, everybody's vulnerable to all the things we've talked about during this semester. All those attacks that we talked about, those can all attack power utility. All the web attacks and the phishing and the social engineering, all of these things we've talked about this semester can be used against a power utility or any other utility to try to turn them off. Again, social engineering is a very powerful tool. It's frequently used and unfortunately frequently successful. And sometimes an attacker will put something in the system that is to infiltrate a computer system, plant some malware that is a logic time bomb that will go off at a later date or upon command from headquarters. Cyber warfare. Yeah, people are fighting wars now with computers. Richard Clarke, who, by the way, was the person who made the quote in the beginning of this lecture, defined cyber warfare as actions by a nation's state to penetrate other nations' computers or networks for the purpose of causing damage or disruption. Well, that's pretty broad action. And of course, people and countries have made cyber warfare a big part of their warfare attack. Not only do they want to launch missiles and soldiers, but they're going to do it with cyber attacks. We're going to talk about defenses, but there's also offense. Many countries have organizations that have been training to attack an opponent if they find it necessary to do so. In the United States, the National Security Agency, the NSA, states from the very beginning that they have two roles. One is a defensive role to protect the United States, and then they have an offensive role, which they use in case necessary. Defensive goals, of course, when you have cyber warfare, defensive goals are to protect your infrastructure. You don't want some other country turning off all your power. That's going to make a lot of problems. They want to, of course, they want to reduce our vulnerability. This is things you can do before an attack, but you want to improve the cyber security of the nation. And that's one of the NSA's goals. Of course, if there is an attack, you want to minimize the damage that occurs and reduce the amount of time it takes to recover. You want to have plans in place and all sorts of procedures to recover in case of a cyber attack. Also, some of the attacks are misinformation attacks, propaganda campaigns, and other campaigns against our system. putting misleading things on social media. And the NSA is after to try to reduce that. There are basically 4 areas of cyber warfare threats. So I'm going to go over each one of these in more detail: espionage, or spying, sabotage, propaganda, and economic disruption. Okay. Spying, being espionage, is not an act of war, nor is cyber espionage. We've had several cases of cyber espionage. Just a couple of years ago, a foreign country infiltrated into a networking monitoring utility. It was a piece of software that many companies use that was there to monitor your networks. Well, it monitored your networks all right and reported what it found back to headquarters in some other country, which was not, of course, what anybody wanted. And that got into a lot of companies, and everybody was yelling and screaming, but in fact, it was just spying. The software didn't do anything malicious, it just spied, and probably saw a lot. Of course, many countries are out there spying. The NSA has an offensive branch, and so they're probably out there spying. At least, I should think they are. And cyber espionage can be done by either governments or civilians. So you can go out and look. People want to usually spy on government secrets. That's what spies do. They want to find out whatever spies want to find out. And of course, not only do they look for the governments, but they're also interested in companies trying to get their intellectual property and company trade secrets. Edward Snowden, who worked for the NSA for a while and then dumped a lot of information to WikiLeaks, and then he's now in the Soviet Union, or Russia. I'm old. It's Russia now, I understand. Russia said that the NSA was looking at the metadata about phone calls to and from suspected individuals and countries. I think we talked about that earlier. The metadata being the kind of information you find in your detailed phone bill, who you called, when you called, and how long it lasted. They also were recording cell phone coverage in lots of places. Big Brother is watching, and in several different countries, they were recording nearly everything. And a few years ago, the Office of Personnel Management, which is a branch of the United States government that keeps track of personnel, had a whole bunch of records stolen from all the people who work at the government, including like Social Security numbers and other sorts of fun things. It's probably China, but we don't know for sure. Okay, that's espionage. Sabotage. Sabotage is going out there and trying to break things. And of course, that's really useful for both military, and there are attacks against civilian infrastructure. Attackers want to minimize the opponent's effectiveness. You want to go out there and do something that makes life difficult for whoever you're attacking. Big ones, of course, are breaking the infrastructure. That could be communications. If the opponent cannot communicate well, it makes it much harder for them to function and for them to defend themselves or to attack you. Again, disabling utilities is just to make things difficult for them to get around. That's would be disabling mobility, causing problems that require the opponent to divert resources. You're going to cause problems so that the opponent will have to spend a lot of time trying to fix those problems instead of spending that time attacking you or defending you whenever you want. We've seen a bunch of this in Ukraine. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Propaganda. Okay. The United States is very vulnerable to this because we have Facebook and Twitter and Snapchat and you name it. It usually started in the United States, and people use it all over the place. People use it in the United States and many other countries, but that makes it vulnerable from other attackers who want to get their message out to the people. And you use the messaging for many purposes, usually to spread misinformation. During the time of elections, particularly trying to spread misinformation about opponents. If some country wants, if Albania wants a certain person elected, they will try to spread misinformation about the opponents. Of course, in addition to the election, they can try to cause panic and create other problems. And there's economic disruption. You go out there and you mess up the stock exchange. you're going to cause some problems. Of course, you can also mess up the Federal Reserve, and this can really cause some difficulties. Or you can just attack individual companies and make it difficult for them to do their work. All of these can cause it. What do you think is the worst one? So here's another question. Let's pop this poll open. And there, you should be able to vote on this one. Does anybody, anybody else want to put their 2 cents worth in? I guess not. Okay. All right, there are answers, which I hope you can see, pretty evenly divided. Slight edge to economic disruption. Now you're going to expect I'm going to tell you the answer. I don't know the answer. I Googled around looking for the answer myself. This is an old slide, and they're all dangerous. I mean, all of the above. You can make a good argument for why each one of these might be most damaging. Doing something like this, espionage, can know what the opponent is doing, sabotage, making a mess of things, propaganda. Yeah, if you convince the public that they either do or don't want to do something, that can do it. I mean, if you're a country and you can convince the public that you don't want to attack that country, they're so nice, that can save you. Of course, economic disruption can make everything stop. Okay. Okay, I got a couple examples of big cyber attacks. One that was several years ago, what is this, almost 20 years ago. Titan Rain was one that lasted for about 4 or 5 years in the United States and UK, and it was the largest state-sponsored cyber attack going on, and attacking unclassified networks. They didn't attack the governments, but they did unclassified, some government unclassified activities. Defense contractors, all your major defense, Sandia National Labs, NASA, Redstone Arsenal, which does the rockets and stuff. All of these people were under attack for a long time. And the US government defended itself against them, more or less. It was expected that China did it. Sometimes it's hard to tell who did the attack. China denies that it did it. It suggests that even though the attack appears to come from China, in other words, tracing back through the network, it looks like the commands were coming out of China. They suspected that, or they at least claimed that somebody was bouncing their commands through a Chinese server and then into the United States and the UK. But we may never know. We have had a cyber war. First cyber war was back 2007. Russia launched a cyber war against Estonia. Estonia is one of the countries, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania up there in the Baltic Sea that are neighbors to Russia. At that time, Estonia was going to take down some Soviet era grave markers. And you can imagine it's something like taking down Confederate statues in North Carolina, made some people mad. There are a number of ethnic Russians in Estonia, and they got upset. And then Russia decided that they were upset. They weren't going to, go tanks across the border, but they were going to attack. They attacked several websites of the Estonian parliament, newspapers, the media, banks. All of these were attacked. There are a lot of distributed denial of service attack, which I should hope you understand what a distributed denial of service attack is. In the end, Estonia kind of defended against them. Eventually, Russia stopped, and I think they only did it for a few days, but Estonia recovered. In result of this, NATO, North American Treaty Organization, created the Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence, and they headquartered it in Tallinn, Estonia. That's the capital of Estonia. And so now Estonia is well prepared against cyber attack. And I go, well, who did it? Well, of course, Russia did it, but who in Russia? This Konstantin Goskolkov claimed that the Nasha pro-Kremlin youth movement in Moldavia and Transnistria did it. Transnistria, you say? Yes, Transnistria. That's a small part of Moldavia on the border with Ukraine. And the Estonians did manage to arrest an ethnic Russian, again, not ethnic, an ethnic Russian in Estonia, and charged and convicted him helping with this. There are other cyber attacks. The country of Georgia in Europe was attacked by the Russians back in August 2008. The Russians, again, this was a live war. I mean, tanks came rolling across the border in August 7th. But before that, about 2 weeks before the tanks came running across, they started attacking the Georgian computers. And so this was about the first instance of where they started by doing a cyber warfare and then ended up bringing the tanks across the border. Yeah, and they were pretty effective. Well, the president's website was disabled. Now, you have to ask yourself, is that going to be a big problem? Well, maybe, maybe not. I'm trying to think of if the White House website was disabled, would I notice? Somebody would tell me about it. But anyway, moving on. Yes, they managed to get a Turkish website to blow up part of this war. Do they believe it was an attack against the control system attack against the control system of the pipeline that it caused it to overpressure and break. And it didn't last very long. On August 8th, the denial of service attacks were worst, and then it started to peter off. Georgia became better at defending itself, and I think they got some help from other countries. Unfortunately, a lot of the traffic was from Georgia was routed through Russia. They attacked the domain name servers and some of the routing traffic, so that Georgian network traffic routed through Russia. And then, of course, as it routed through Russia, Russia just took it apart. Yes. So eventually, the Georgians started to get help from Estonia and Poland and other European countries. The Georgians themselves attacked back at Russia. They got at least one Moscow newspaper website. It wasn't the government, but at least they did something to make the Russians feel like they didn't completely win. And there was an attack against a Stop Georgia website. That's .ru is Russia. And the website said that if you wanted to help attack Georgia, here was instructions for doing it. So anyone around the world could help participate in the attack against Georgia. Yay. There have been some hybrid warfare. That is a combination of attack of physical and cyber warfare. We mentioned just previously a couple of wars started with cyber attacks. About 12 years ago, or 10 years ago, the Pentagon said in a report to Congress that the United States reserves the right to retaliate with military force against a cyber attack. Military force being physical military force. The Israeli Defense Force did that a couple of years ago. They were once again having it out with Palestinians, which they seem to do on a constant basis. But each side was being nasty towards the other. And apparently Hamas had a hacking group that was attacking the Israelis. And so in addition to doing the cyber defense against the attacks, they bombed the building where they believe the Gaza Hamas hacking group was active, and probably killed a bunch of people, and at least got their equipment. Georgia. Well, what about this Georgia? Yeah, peaches and everything. Who's bigger? Just a real quick, silly question. Is Georgia the country bigger than Georgia or the state? This will not be on the exam on Wednesday. Anybody else? Usually we get a couple more. Get one more person, that's good enough. I like that because we got a time. Oh, no, somebody snuck in there and put Georgia the state. Well, yes. Turns out, in fact, the country of Georgia is about half the size in square miles of the state of Georgia and has 38% of the population of the state of Georgia. So it's a less dense. That's a small country there in Europe, near Ukraine. And okay. So what did I say today? All the things we talked about this semester, as far as cyber attacks, can be used against critical infrastructure. And of course, disabling the infrastructure can really mess up a country or an opponent. There are indications that the US is certainly not as strong as we would like to be. Of course, that does provide job opportunities for students in cybersecurity. And cyber warfare is unfortunately becoming a significant part of international conflicts. Okay, that's it for. All right, that's enough. Bored you to death on cyber warfare. Let's do a little review for the exam, which will be on Wednesday. So, okay, there we are. Hopefully you can see the screen with the quote by Tony Hoare. This has little to do with the exam, but I kind of like the quote anyway, so I saw it. Okay. Okay, let's talk about this exam coming up. First of all, the undergraduates in Comp 422, or if there are any graduates in Comp 422, has a malware program assignment. That's out there. It's been posted since last weekend. I think Saturday I put it out there. You have to write a malware program. There are a couple requirements. First, you have to keep the user amused for, I think, 10 seconds. That's worth like 2 points. This is a 50-point part one of the question. And for 3 points, you have to use a separate thread to hide what you're doing. That is, start a new thread or a new process that will execute the malicious part, whereas the benign portion that's keeping the user amused runs in a separate thread. Okay. And then the program has to do one of the following, or both of the following. 40 points for doing one, 45 points for doing both. You have to read the web page, www.ncat.edu, that evil website, with the parameter user ID equals, and then the user ID that is running the program. You can either go out and find the user ID running the program. That's pretty simple. You can do it in almost all languages. Just Google it up if you want to find it. Get yourself 2 points that way. If you don't want to bother, you just put a quote out there and put your username in there. That's good for. Another one is to copy the executable of the program into the /temp directory. We will assume that the /temp directory already exists. If you're testing your program, you might want to create it. Just copy the .exe file or the .class file for your program. You can assume that we haven't changed the name. You know what you called it, and so just copy it over there. You don't have to do anything tricky. You don't have to make a self-replicating program or anything. Just do a copy. does anybody in Comp 422 have a question about this assignment? I'm listening. Yes, somebody odd.
Yeah, so you just mean by send the username to the website, you just mean filling that URL with the user's username?
Right, just if you just read the website with the parameter user ID equals whatever user ID is, well, because as it sends that, it sends the whole information to the ncat.edu server. And if the ncat.edu server was looking for a parameter user ID, it would be able to read that information and get it. Turns out, I don't believe the NCAT website is doing that, but it could have been another. I decided not to use my separate website, didn't use my website, just use NCAT. It's always available and seems to always work. So we'll attack, well, not really attacking the website at all. It's doing nothing to it. You can use it. Now, if you, whatever language you want, read the website. Or now you don't have to probably open up, there are many easy ways to read this. If you're in Java, you can just open a URL and read it. Similar things in C++, and I believe in Python. You can do this whatever language you like. Python, C++, C, Java, C#, whatever turns you on. My TA will grade it carefully. And then just read that website, do the parameter. So from the programmer's point of view, it doesn't look like you did anything to send it, but the website could have gotten the information. Okay, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Any other questions? Does this seem impossible to do? The students going to be turning in blank programs. This is worth a lot of points. The TA was concerned that the students wouldn't be able to do this, but I have more faith in you. I think you can do something like this. This isn't very hard. Parts of this stuff, most of this, I taught in Comp 163 a couple of years ago. And at least I know at least one of you took Comp 163 from me. So you better do a good job. Okay, any other questions about this? Of course, the rest of the exam, part 2 of the Comp 422 exam, and the whole Comp 620 exam starts at 6 a.m. on Wednesday, and will be open until midnight. If you are a wise student, you will not look at this around 11:30 and say, well, what did old Dr. Williams put out on the exam? Because you got to get it done by midnight. So you might want to start. Now, I don't think it'll take you too long. A couple hours at most, worst case scenario, I think. That's my guess. If you don't mind, keep track of how long it took you to work on the exam, and we'll ask that information later. Okay, so yeah, these are the mechanics. Yeah, 6 a.m. It'll be out on Blackboard. And the topics cover everything since the second exam. And these are the topics. And we'll talk about some of that in just a few minutes. You can read the malware is bolded there. I've already written the exam. My TA and I have written the exam and written it, refined it, rewrote it, edited it, and now we've got it ready. It turns out, and I look at it now after writing the exam, that there's more questions on malware than on the other topics. It wasn't evenly divided. I mean, I tried to evenly divide the questions, more of the stuff, but I admit malware, because malware was an easy topic, as you can see from the Comp 622, or excuse me, 422 part 1, that's a malware issue. Malware is an easy question. Okay, so let's move on and look at some of the review some of the things. And of course, ask questions, scream out, put something in the chat or whatever if you have an issue about something. Probably best just to unmute yourself and yell at us. Okay, secure software development. There are many different levels and phases of software development. Security is important often. This is mostly like the waterfall model. build requirements, you write the design, then you actually code it up, then you try to put it into place, and then the maintenance phase, going back and fixing problems or adding new features. On each of those phases, you have to do software development, or excuse me, you have to worry about security. You have to put security in at all levels. It's best if you fix things, if you make it secure at the very beginning, at the design level. Some data I got here from IBM says it's 100 times more expensive to fix things in the maintenance level. The reason it's so easy, of course, at the design level, if you realize, oh, here's a problem, you haven't spent all the time implementing it and testing it, and you go, oh, now we got to go back, and you got to go back. And sometimes a fix requires a substantial change in the way the program works. If you do it at the design level, it's a lot easier and you get things done. Okay. There are programs that will help you analyze your code and seeing if you have big faults, well-known problems. Static code in that. Static in the sense that it reviews the source code and looks for known problems. There are several tools available for this out on the website. OWASP has some. And there are also dynamic tools that run the code and look for problems. There are advantages to it. You can go out there and run static code analysis on everything. Some companies, whenever they make a change, they go out there and run their static code analysis on all their software just to make sure that nothing looks vulnerable now that wasn't vulnerable yesterday. Of course, analysis looks for well-known vulnerabilities. If it's an unknown vulnerability, then it may not find it. And it has to be an update to the code to look for that vulnerability. Now, the code, once they find something, are pretty simple. They will tell you on this line of this file, they suspect that there's this problem. I ran several of these static code analysis tools on some software I had, and yes, they tell you right here, I think you're doing something wrong. The problem is that they tend to find a lot of false positives. False positives being they suspect that some code is causing a security weakness, when in fact, no, it is not. Humans who have a greater knowledge of how the program is running can say, nope, that's not a problem. In my example, I was running it on PHP code as it was merging strings together to make a SQL query. And it goes, oh my goodness, you're putting data into an SQL query. Well, yes, but it was mostly for the error messages. I was taking the error code that was returned by the system and merging it in and concatenating it into the error message code. Well, no, I don't think the error message returned by the system has an attack in it. So I didn't feel it was really dangerous, but it thought it was. Every error message was flagged. One of the problems, of course, I knew that was okay, but sometimes it's hard to prove. Did this thing really find an error, or is it just another false positive? And of course, there are false negatives, meaning a problem goes through and it doesn't find it. Another problem, of course, is that a lot of this code involves all sorts of libraries, other parts of the program that you got from somewhere else. It's difficult to analyze it without all the many pieces. Remember, this is source code analysis. Okay, that's on. There are other things that you'll find out in the exam that'll be on there. Firewalls. We spent a little time on the firewall and spent some time on our firewall simulation. At least if you were there, if you were watching it as a recording, you didn't see the firewall simulation, which is really dull. So dull that I edited it out of the recording. But firewalls block traffic from the internet. And so traffic coming into your network goes through a router, which is often part of a firewall system. You might have multiple hardware pieces doing the firewall that filters the traffic coming through to try to keep bad traffic out. You can do the firewalls either in hardware or software, often both. Depends on which level you're using. You can have packet filters, which are very simple at different levels. These are the network transport and application level, are different OSI or internet layers. Packet filtering looks at where did this come from? Where is this going? We use packet filtering primarily in the simulation of the firewall. We also did a little bit of transport layer. We're looking at what level protocol are they using. An application layer gateways look at what is that doing. For instance, an application layer gateway would be email filter. Here at A&T, we have pretty advanced email filtering. It looks at the emails coming in, looks for problems, and actually changes your links in an email so that it will be runtime analyzed when you click on the link. A NAT, an NAT, is a network address translation. It is a device that it's a device that changes the addresses of the computers inside your network to what the internet sees. So you have one set of addresses for your local network, and then as they go outside through your router to the internet, it changes the addresses basically all to one address. So as the router has one address, so the internet sees one address, lots of users on that one address, but one address going out. And they have no knowledge of what really is the structure or the addresses of the individual computers on your local network. That keeps people from being able to attack or even find out about your computers. A common cause of vulnerabilities is the domain name servers, DNS. Originally, when they built the domain name servers, there was no security on them at all. I can tell you, as a guy with an old gray beard, when they first started all this computer stuff, we didn't do security. We thought we were the ones running it. We didn't even think about that. And then things started to happen. Now it's very important. If you mess up the domain name server, you can send users to other places. So the example here is if you're looking for the internet address of www.acme.com, which would come from a domain name server, if you poison the domain name server, then it might send the users off to like badguys.com when they wanted to go to acme.com. And of course, they make the badguys.com website look just like the acme.com, but collecting your information. Also, domain name servers can be attacked by distributed denial of service attacks. Domain name servers are used to translate names, which are things like www.acme.com, English sort of like names, into internet addresses, which are a 32-bit number that we use to route things around the internet. ARP is used to translate internet addresses to local hardware addresses or MAC addresses. So your computer keeps a cache of the MAC addresses and a cache of the internet addresses. Once it looks these things up, it keeps a copy in RAM so it can find that information very quickly. So if it wants to communicate to the same MAC address, because once you look once, it doesn't want to look it up again. So if you're going to go back to that same site, it doesn't want to have to keep looking it up, so it keeps that. And there are, unfortunately, ways of poisoning that information. An attacker might be able to send an incorrect address to your system. And so you think you've got the correct hardware address for an internet address, but in fact, you're sending your information to the wrong site. And that will cause a fraudulent site to be getting the traffic that should go to the authentic site. Okay, that was domain name servers and networks. We also talked about election security. A couple of things. I mentioned that voting machines should not be networked. That opens them up to all sorts of problems. In North Carolina, we use paper ballots. Paper ballots are not networked. Now, I serve as an election judge. Last week, I was there for my 14-hour stint on the elections. And there were a couple of voters thought that paper ballots were antiques, that we had gone back 20 years and were using paper ballots. On the other hand, I can promise you that neither the paper nor the pen that they used had been attacked by any foreign government. So you mark it on the papers. No, of course, you mark it on the paper, they can keep track of it. Once they feed it into the vote counting machine, the vote machine counts it, produces multiple copies of the results, and they are sent to headquarters in multiple ways. It's interesting to note that there are about 8,000 voting precincts in the United States. There's 146 precincts in Guilford County. There are 100 counties in North Carolina. And they say 100,000 voting places. That seems like a small number to me. I would have thought more. Anyways, all places to vote, all different systems. While states often may have some sort of standardized voting system, and some states do and some states don't, that's organized locally. While North Carolina has a standardized voting system, it runs independently of each other. Each county organizes their voting system. And while all 146 precincts in Guilford County are organized by the Guilford County Board of Elections, that has little connection to the state. When we actually tabulate the votes, again, voting machines, here in North Carolina, the voting machines are only used to count the ballots. When you vote, you mark the paper, that paper is saved, and that paper is checked later by recounting the votes. And so the results are tabulated and counted by counties. The counties then report the results to the state. There is no electronic national vote aggregation system. In other words, there's nothing that brings all the votes together for the whole United States. The Electoral College representatives do that. We have a system invented in the horse and buggy days, and it has all sorts of time. You don't have to report your results until sometime in January, I think January 6th. Of course, we all remember the January 6th riots against the Capitol. That was because the Capitol was doing its official vote counting. There are no computers that do that. So while there may be county and state computers to be vulnerable, there is no national computer that could be attacked, because there is no national computer that counts votes. We do it by hand. Of course, by that point, you're counting just the state results. This is an interesting chart, which shows that voting by mail has become very popular. Some states do all their voting by mail. There's early voting, which has become more and more popular here in North Carolina. And so, well, at one time, 90% of the voters voted in person on election day. Now, only about 30% of the voters vote in person on election day, which means about 70% of the voters vote earlier and by an alternative means. Malware. Again, I mentioned malware is pretty heavy in the exam. There are all sorts of types of malware. We've got a zoo here. Trojan horses. A Trojan horse is a program that somebody writes to do something that you find useful. You do something, either a game or something that you want to run. And while that program is running, it's also doing something else in the background. It's doing something you don't want done. Now, that differs from a virus. When a virus corrupts other executables. The virus propagates itself by copying the virus into another executable, so that the otherwise benign executable, when you now execute it, causes that malware to execute. Whereas a Trojan horse, the malware was built into the program by the person who wrote the program initially. A virus writes the malware into otherwise benign and useful software. For instance, you could run the malware and it might corrupt your browser or your spreadsheet, so that when you execute your browser and your spreadsheet, it does something nasty. Worms are self-replicating programs. They copy themselves all over. Trojan horse may copy itself, or a self-replicating program can copy itself to all sorts of means. It can copy itself to local files on the computer. It might propagate through all sorts of network means. And then there are rabbits. A rabbit is a program that just wastes time. It's kind of part of another malware, all sorts of things. You can sit there and create lots of processes. You can create lots of files to fill up the disk, all sorts of things that you might do to waste resources, fill up the limited resources of the computer. That would be a rabbit. Here's a question for you to think about: antiviruses. How do they work? So there you go. I'm not sure if can you read that says search executables to match virus signatures, and part C is inoculate your computer against infection. All right. Anybody else? The usual culprits trying to vote? There's usually a couple others. Oh, maybe they fell asleep. I know. Oh, somebody else woke up. Okay. Well, there we have the results. Yes. The answer I was thinking about was B, search executables to match virus signatures. They don't always work real well on new viruses because these virus signatures, it's just a pattern matching. It's looking for particular patterns of the virus in your executable. If it finds that, it goes, oh, you're probably infected. If you have a new virus, if some COMP422 or COMP620 student invents a new virus and starts infecting other machines, the antivirus might not find it until they're aware that somebody's out there infecting systems and somebody reports it back to the antivirus companies. Oh, okay. What generally run once a day? Most antiviruses run continuously, primarily if you start writing into a file. I noticed if you're doing updates, if you're doing software, particularly if you're not doing system updates or Microsoft updates, if you're updating your copy of the Java SDK, well, that's one of my favorites. If you decide to update the Java development kit, you're getting lots of new files and writing them out the disk. My antivirus just goes wild. It starts consuming many resources because it's going to read every file to make sure that I'm not slipping anything dangerous in there. Okay. All right. That's enough of that. Hiding viruses. Viruses try to hide. They try to hide from the antivirus software. It's a game where the viruses try to hide and the antivirus programs try to find them. A common way of hiding is to encrypt the code. They don't have to go to a lot of trouble to encrypt things. Frequently, it's just exclusive or the virus code with a random number that's saved in the code so that it can pick that up and use it again. But it just hides the code. So it doesn't look the same, and every copy of the virus in different software looks different, trying to hurt the pattern matches. The code that encrypts it, which isn't very long, but that is what the antivirus programs often find. And again, encryption is not very complicated. And then there's polymorphic viruses. That means it rearranges the code. There are different ways you can do things. And if you want to add one to a number, you can go, in most of your computer languages, you can go, if the virus is dog, you can go dog plus plus, or plus plus dog, or dog equals dog plus one. Other ways, yes, or dog plus equals one. Those all add one to the code and often result in different machine language. So there's many ways to do this. Social engineering, yes. Alas, us humans are often the weak link in the software security. Sometimes the easiest way to find out the password is to ask somebody who knows, and they might tell you. So social engineering is trying to do that through many different ways. Phishing is a popular way. Phishing is sending email to people asking them for information that they probably should not reveal. You usually masquerade as some trustworthy person, or you might try to send email that looks like it came from the boss or the administration. And so the person will feel obligated to answer, and they send the answer off to that, what they think is an important person, but in fact, no, it's an attacker. So now the attacker has something they shouldn't have. It's not hard to do. If you're writing an email, when you write something that looks like a link, in this case, if you write www.nice.com, your email system will create HTML, of course. If you have text email, some emails in text, the links are not in the email, and that's safe. That's one way to protect yourself against some phishing attacks, is to read your email only in text. Fortunately, you sometimes lose a lot of the information in the text-only email, because a lot of emails, people are now doing all sorts of fancy things. You get emails that lots of pictures and stuff, and the links, therefore, are active. So if you type www.nice.com in my email system, when I use Microsoft Outlook or Gmail, it automatically makes it into a link. But if you highlight the link, at least in Microsoft Word and Outlook, if you press Control-K, you can then specify where you want it to link to. So you can highlight www.nice.com, press Control-K, and then type that it's supposed to actually go to www.evil.com. And so now when the user sees their email, they'll see www.nice.com, but if they click on it, they'll go to evil.com. Now, if you're looking at your email, some browsers or some email systems, well, if you put your mouse over the link, it will show you in the lower left-hand corner, at least in my systems, the lower left corner, it'll tell you where it's going to go. And if it looks, if it says www.nice.com, you can probably click on it. If, on the other hand, you think it's going to go to Nice, but instead it says evil.com, you better watch out. I have noticed that phone browsers are not as safe. Phone browsers don't seem to do this for you. Although usually the first time you click on a link in a text message, they'll warn you, oh, do you really want to do this? And you can click, yes, I do, and click the box that says, don't ever bother me about this again. We talked about privacy for a while, because of course, this is, after all, information privacy and security. Privacy is trying to keep your information to yourself and not let other people know things that you don't want them to know. What that entails is a cultural event. I think we mentioned that there's a significant relationship between person's age and how much they want their location. At least I did a study, didn't publish that study, but we did a study and found out that it correlates very strongly. Older you get, the more likely you don't want people to know where you are. Younger people were happy to give the information away. And other parts of security are the same. People were concerned when the TSA did the microwave scattering systems. When you get scanned at the airport, you go to the airport, you go through the scanners, they send you the systems that kind of look through your clothes, and some people were very concerned about that. Hey, that might impact you. If you are a 69-year-old man, I don't think anybody wants to look at me naked. So I don't worry about it at all. Yes, we talked about phone privacy in North Carolina, and supported by federal law. At least one of the people in the phone call, that is either the person who called or the person who received the call, one of you can decide to record the phone call. The other person doesn't have to agree. I don't really know what the law is about telling the other person. I always get this call is being recorded for quality and training purposes, which of course is a lie to start with, but at least they tell you. Now, what if I said, no, I don't want you to record it? Will they stop? I'm not sure. Some states require that everybody agrees. In other words, in North Carolina, I guess I don't have to agree, but in some states, yes. If you're going to record it, you have to state that you agree to being recorded. You cannot record a phone call if you're not either the person who started the call or the person who received the call. That is, if Alice is going to call Bob, Charlie cannot record the phone conversation. And another question here. So let's try this one. Okay, what do you think about this? Oh, that, by the way, B is sent from the wrong email domain. Okay. A couple of you need to wake up and answer. Okay. I guess maybe so. All right. Oh, some more. Oh, okay. That's enough for now. Look, there was only one of you who was fooled. Yes, the answer is all the above. Sometimes phishing attacks come from overseas, written by people for whom English is not their native language, and it doesn't look very good. A company, when it sends out a message or a note to everyone, is going to be very careful that it's spelled well and has good grammar. They probably have their publications and their PR people looking at the email before it goes out. So if they have grammar errors or spelling errors, be wary. Sent from the wrong email domain. What I mean by that is I get email telling me there's problems with the email system. The email system needs to change something and they want my password to make a change. But it doesn't come from A&T. It's telling me about a problem in the ncat.edu email system, but it comes from something dot some foreign country. Well, it's not likely that our email system is being managed by some foreign country. That's something good. And again, urgent calls. They want you to do something immediately. That happens in the phone, text messages, email. A lot of the attackers try to make it urgent. Do this right away. You got to do this now. No, you don't. If they're told you have to do it now, it's time to step back, take a deep breath, and think: is this really urgent? Am I being scammed? So watch that. The answer is all of the above. And part of the government has taken some major steps in keeping our health information secure. Before HIPAA, it wasn't secure, but this is I don't remember what HIPAA stands for, but it's Health something Act. It keeps your health personal information private. It also modernized the flow of information, standardized the format that we ship health information around between insurance companies and health providers, and establishes what they can release and how they can release it and what are the limitations. It also requires that everything be encrypted as it's sent around. So it significantly strengthens that. The European Union has the General Data Protection Regulation, which specifies what private information companies can keep and rules about keeping it. They have to be able, individuals have to be able to review their information and have to be able to change it or delete it. This impacts companies in the United States that sell things to the European Union or the European Economic Area. Yes, and part of it impacts cookies, because cookies are linked to individuals, or at least to computers, and therefore they keep track of information. And that's why you see all these cookie things. We are using cookies. Click here to approve the use of cookies, or click here to specify which cookies you want us to use. That's because the General Data Protection Regulation of Europe requires that you do that. And there are some parts of the United States, particularly California, requires that they do this. And so everybody's doing it now, just so if somebody connects to them from California, they don't want to get in trouble. The dark web is that parts of the internet that doesn't want to be found. does its routing using the onion routing system. Onion routing is where there are a group of onion routers that send messages from one router to another router to another router, where the route is initially determined by the sender, and the information is all encrypted using public key encryption, usually RSA encryption. And so if you send information to a series of routers, and usually at least 3, so you'll encrypt something in router number 1's using their public key and send it to router number 1. Router number 1 decrypts it with its private key, which presumably only router number 1, and sees, oh, I'm supposed to send this message to router number 2. It doesn't know what the message is because all the information that it's going to send to router 2 is encrypted with router 2's public key. So it ships it off to router 2, which then router 2 can decrypt it. Now, router 2 only knows that it came from router 1 and it got this information, doesn't know who sent it to router 1. So router 1 decrypts it and sees that this message is supposed to go to router 3. So it sends the message to router 3, and of course the message is encrypted with router 3's public key. So router 2 doesn't know what it is, but it sends it off to router 3. Now router 3, let's assume it is the last one. Router 3 will decrypt it and say, oh, this is supposed to go to this destination. And so it will send the data off to that destination, which then, so now the destination gets it. The destination sees that it comes from router 3, but doesn't know anything else. Router 3 knows that it came from router 2, but nothing more. Now, as it goes along the way, each one of these routers keeps track of where it came from. So if the destination wants to return data, and usually, of course, this is the web, so it's going to send a request to a website, and then it sends a reply back. So the reply back goes, the destination sends the reply back to router 3, which recognizes the link and sends it back to router 2, which sends it back to router 1, which sends it to the destination. Nobody in between knows where it's going, but the router 1 knows the final destination return message. So that's onion routing. Tor is onion router, which is how the dark web works. All right. As you all know, the third exam is on Wednesday. It'll be on Blackboard. Show up at 6 a.m. It's available till midnight. The final exam in this class is Monday, December 5th. I point out that Monday is not the time you'll find in the university listing for final exam times. Our official final exam time is Friday. Nope, we're doing it on Monday. This will not interfere with anybody's exam because Monday, December 5th is the final exam for classes that meet 5 o'clock to 6. And since our class starts 4:30, goes through 5 o'clock to 5:45, nobody has a class at that time. Also, of course, that the exam will be available for 18 hours. And surely, sometime in that 18 hours during the final exam week, you'll have some time. Worst case, you'll have 2 other exams during that week. By the way, according to university regulations, you cannot be required to take more than 3 final exams on any given day. If you happen to be scheduled for 3 final exams on a given day, one of your classes has to move. If you have that problem, let me know. And I'll just tell you, you can do it anytime from 6 a.m. to midnight. All right, well, if you actually have 3 classes, let me know. We'll do something. Very, very rarely does this happen. Okay, that's it.
I have a quick question about the coding assignment.
Yes.
Should it open the web page when it sends the information back or no?
Oh, I don't need to see the results. No, your program does this hiding in the background. In other words, you go out and basically ask to read that web page. What you do with the results, you can just throw the results away. It doesn't matter.
Okay, so I just read the URL and I don't have to do anything else with it.
Well, okay. Yes, read as if you were reading the contents, but you don't need to display them or do anything with the contents, because when you send the URL to www.ncat.edu, you'll send it with that parameter user ID equals whatever you send. If the NCAT website was collecting that information, it would get the user ID and I thought about using my website and actually collecting it, and I realized, why bother? You use the NCAT website, it does not respond to the user ID field in the URL, so it doesn't care. I tested it, it's all right. I'm sure somebody in IT will have a fit that I'm using their website for computer security stuff. Too bad. Okay, does that answer the question, I hope?
Yeah.
Any other questions about, in particular about the Count 422 assignment, or what dangers might show up 6 o'clock on Wednesday morning? Everybody's all set? Well, if you do have a problem or a question or an issue, particularly during the exam, send me an email, send me a text message, or if you get desperate, you can call my cell phone. All the information's on the syllabus, and I'll see what I can do about it. So good luck on the exam. And if you would, keep track of how long it took you, and we'll figure that out next week. And I wish to thank those students who responded to my email about topics. Yes, I will try to incorporate that information into the following 3 lectures. So, see you later. Get my, oh, can't see that. Okay. That's all for now. Bye.
Thank you.